Okay, let's talk about something that didn't come out in 2015. Welcome to the Dollhouse. But before we talk about the movie, let's talk about Solondz, the director, first. Now, Todd Solondz, I believe that's how you pronounce his name, makes movies that now that I've seen this one, and this is the second film of his that I've seen. He makes movies that makes us look at ourselves with the most horrifying of reflections. At least that's my opinion. He makes movies with characters that are neither good or bad. They all have flaws. They're all likable to a certain extent, but they are all absolutely flawed people to the point where you see the worst in them. The main character of the films that I've seen of his are usually really terrible characters that you want to sympathize with. And he creates this really complex emotional ground of character development. He really just creates some of these um really uncomfortable moments that you'll ever see in film ever. He's he's never compromising to a certain emotional structure to any Hollywood film I had ever seen. You know, he goes for the raw element. He goes for raw emotion. He goes for reality because we all know that in real life movie logic never works and nothing is either happy or sad. You're always in this mixed state of emotions. And this movies are basically a representation of that, and it's quite impressive. Welcome to the Dollhouse is just another example of that. This is one of the rawest, one of the most raw, one of the most horrifying, one of the most realistically unhopeful depictions of childhood I have ever of teenage years of puberty I have ever seen. And it's all really amplified by this great performance. Like everybody's good. Nobody's bad in this movie. But the performance, the main character. I know the actress was in Princess Diaries, and that's the only thing I've seen of her beforehand. But her performance in this movie, I'm not sure if that's how she really acts in real life. Some people are at that awkward, but her performance in this movie as the main character Dawn is one of the most awkward, one of the most perfectly portrayed portrayal of a kid who's bullied, who probably is not really being loved in the family that much, who's probably being outcasted by so many people in school. This is a perfect example of a loser. Like everything she does is something that you would imagine a kid who's unpopular would do. There's this, especially this scene where her brother, the main character's brother's band, is playing in the garage, and this band has a singer who the main character is having a crush on. So you know the singer is singing, so the main character Dawn is kind of listening to the song. She's kind of dancing, and she does this awkward dance, and that's really a scene where she shows that awkwardness on a physical level. And it's so awkwardly done that it's almost impossible for me to think that this is not real. This has to be real. This has to be how this person acts. If not, this is just genius acting. This is one of the best child performances I have ever seen because it's just so perfectly awkward. It's so perfectly painful as well. She does everything that I would cringe at if somebody actually did this. But the character is supposed to act that way. It fits the script perfectly. It's one of the best performances I've seen ever, quite frankly. It's just so awkward, but it's supposed to be. And like I said, this film is one of the most realistic portrayals of of the worst parts of childhood of your teenage years ever. Like the depictions in high school are so realistic. Everywhere you go, the bullies are using the word faggot, and it's sad. You know, it's a sad fact that they're using the word, but It's true. They use the word for an insult. It's sad, but it's true. And the fact that they just show, the director actually choosing to show this absolutely horrifying form of reality just right in your face is kind of impressive to me. The bullying also happens for really terrible reasons. Like, there's no good reasoning for the bullying to happen. There's this one scene where Dawn kind of confronts this bully in the bathroom, and she asks her, "Why do you hate me?" And the bully simply says, "Because you're ugly." Now, obviously, to a sane person, that wouldn't make any goddamn sense. But in high school logic, in middle school logic, because this is kind of said in middle school, it would make sense for the bully, because the bully would make any excuse to bully another person. This is just another example of that. And the fact that the director actually chose to show that aspect of bullying, the fact that it doesn't really happen on good grounds, is very impressive. And also, the parents are assholes. Like, I'll talk about the parents later because I have to talk about a bit more about that. The sexual awakenings of the main character. Like, here's my problem with sexual awakenings depicted in other films. It's either done in an overly pretentious, symbolized way, or they would do it in such a pretty and neat way that it doesn't really feel authentic. In this film, the sexual awakenings are so wrong and so awkward and so just terribly timed and so cringeworthy that while we were watching it, the only thing we are thinking is that this is how it happens. This is real. This is how we learn about sex. We don't know shit, and when we do know at least a bit, we kind of imagine the awkwardest things. We want the awkwardest things. We want older people, and it just becomes this weird symmetry of emotions. It's a really realistic portrayal of it all. And I also like the fact that the main character is not perfect. She's terrible to a certain extent. She wants shallow things. She wants to be cool. Like, she doesn't want to be intelligent, or she's waiting for the future where she'll show her true self. No, she just wants to be cool. She just wants the shallow things. And that's totally what teenagers are. Let's face it, no matter how much you think you're deep, no matter how much you think you're the smartest person in the world, you want to be cool. You want to be pretty. You want that zit on your face to disappear. You're just a teenager. You can't help it. It's just a thing that you have. And the fact that the film is not trying to sugarcoat that element to make you like the character is kind of an impressive feat. Most films will try to make you like the character by making her the most perfect person in the world. In this film, they're just showing you what teenagers are. Just shallow people, quite frankly. Even I kind of go into that category. And I also really like the fact that the film overall reveals the viewer's flawed humanity. Because here's something that happens in the film. Now, Dawn has a little sister named Missy. And Missy, Dawn is supposed to tell Missy that somebody else is supposed to get her after ballerina class. Now, Dawn, intentionally does not tell Missy about that. And Missy gets kidnapped. And for one moment, because throughout the film, Missy is being a total bitch. Like, obviously, she's not intentionally trying to be a bitch, but she's the total bitch throughout the film, even though she's about 7 years old, and it's totally wrong to call her a bitch, but she's such a terrible person. And when she gets kidnapped, for one moment, as a viewer, you kind of wish she would stay kidnapped. When you see the mother being in pain because Missy's kidnapped, you kind of want that to stay the way it is. And you suddenly realize you want this little girl to be dead. Like, when they get a call from the police officer saying that they found Missy's tutu in Times Square, you start to think that maybe Missy's dead. and there's a certain euphoric element coming out, a euphoric emotion coming out of you, and you suddenly realize how terrible of a person you are. You want this little girl to be dead. And when she comes back, when they find Missy, you kind of feel a certain element of, I say, well, you just don't want, you kind of feel bad for Dawn. You want Missy to be kind of gone in the family. And the film just shows, because they build up these great characters and these great grounds of emotion, and these really complex grounds of emotion, when something happens that would help the main character to the slightest bit, because the main character just lives a miserable life, when that happens, you feel great, even though something terrible is happening to another person. It shows the flawed humanity in the viewer as well. That's what's really shocking for me with this movie. And I want to talk about the ending, because the ending ends with her on a bus. She's singing to herself, and everything drowns out except her voice. You can hear her voice out of everything. And I feel like, I thought at first that this was supposed to be hopeful, but the more I thought about it, it felt more lonersome. It felt like she's never going to really get through this whole thing. She's still alone. And I feel like that's definitely what they're trying to do, considering the fact that the supposed sequel, or the supposed film that's supposed to be in the same universe as this film called Palindromes, that also directed by Todd Solondz, is supposed to have this moment where Dawn commits suicide. And considering what happens to her throughout this movie, I think that makes sense, even though it's absolutely depressing. So yeah, the film is great because it's such an authentic portrayal of teenage years, of your teenage years. It's not supposed to be good. It's not supposed to be happy. Nothing's supposed to be bright. It's supposed to be this gritty portrayal of suburban angst. And it's so miserable, and it's so good. The only flaw that I think the film has, and this is really honestly just because this one flaw makes the film less realistic, I think the parents are way too, I think they're way too cruel to Dawn. And I know, not all parents are nice to their kids, but still, these parents are not those kinds of parents. They're nice to the other two kids. Why not Dawn? It's kind of awkward that way. I feel like they're just portrayed in an extremely cruel manner just to emphasize Dawn's position. But I feel like that's kind of a bad way to portray the parents, because the film is trying to be authentic at its very best. And the parents are just way too cruel to a certain comical extent. And I feel like that's the only one flaw throughout the whole movie. The rest is great. You gotta see it. 3.5 out of 4, easily one of the most authentic and miserable depictions of childhood I have ever seen on film. So yeah, 3.5 out of 4. Welcome to the Dollhouse. Bye.